the division I worked in, the people I worked around immediately, there were about 30 of us. There were about 15 people that worked directly for me. And because of the nature of my work, I knew probably 200, 300 people in the business community and the nonprofit community, another 100 people probably at City Hall. So this wasn't like something I could do and really keep it quiet. No matter how I wanted to, this was going to be a big thing. So I wanted to set an example, as I mentioned, and so I went to my human resources chief, and I came out to her and I told her I need some help. And so we started exploring what the rules were. She told my departmental management about it. It turned out that they were very supportive. They were shocked, but they were supportive. And they told me that they wanted to make this a success. So we formed a working group. It involved some of my peers, some of my supervisors. We brought in an expert, Drian Warren, to help us kind of plan this out. And she came with very much the same PowerPoint that she showed you. And then we had the city's EEO, Equal Employment Opportunity Chief, also as part of our group. As easy as this should have been, it still took well over a year to plan this out. There were a lot of things that needed to be figured out. Not only the rules and the laws and all of that good stuff, but how to do it, how to make the announcement to the staff, what kind of training to give them. What would happen if somebody violated city policies? What would, were we going to enforce, and come down on them? I had to wait until I could do my own name change, because in order to change all the personnel documents, my name had to be legally changed. There were a lot of things that went into this. But after about 14 or 15 months, we finally got it all figured out. And we started putting the plan into effect. But there were some problems. My immediate supervisor was, probably is, transphobic, homophobic. He was told in advance what was going to be happening. And he decided that he was going to enlist support to his side and outed me to half the staff before I made my announcement. That just about derailed the entire thing. We had to figure out how to get everybody over to the training room without telling them exactly what was happening, because we really did want to keep this a secret and keep it bottled up until the last minute. But we did. I got 80 of my colleagues and all of the supervisory staff and management staff into a room over in City Hall East. There were about 85 people. And I was sitting up near the front of the room. And the HR chief said, we're here today because we're going to get a lecture on gender expression and workplace transition, because one of your colleagues is going to transition. And that colleague was my male name. If you can imagine what it felt like to have 85 eyes boring into the back of my head, that is what I experienced. But Drian and a female to male trans man named Jake Finn did the Gender 101 training, and then I came up on very shaky legs and told them kind of the story I'm telling you. I had a pretty good reputation in the department. I had been there for about 9.5, 10 years, and I had a lot of friends. And I think that served me very well, because it wasn't like some stranger that was being introduced to them. It was somebody they already knew, and at least at the time I hoped respected. So I did my presentation, and kind of in chronological order. And I got to the point where I was telling them about how happy I was that my wife and my son had agreed to stay with me and support me. And I got a little choked up, as I usually do. And I reached behind me at the table where I had a bottle of water. And I heard a commotion. I turned around, and everybody in the room was on their feet, giving me a standing ovation. And I still get choked up. But I managed to get through that. And we got into Q&A, and there were a lot of good questions. And you know, talking about, Professor Hicks had talked about stereotypes. I'll never forget one of the questions from one of my old friends. He said, after you transition and we call you Carol, can we still talk about sports? And I said, yeah, I'm changing my gender, not my personality. And yeah, we can still talk about sports. And I did have tremendous management support, and that has served me well. Knowing that it was going to be not an easy thing for my colleagues to adapt to, I waited about 10 days, and in that 10 days, we had little mini training sessions, kind of little 10, 15, 20 person gatherings at lunchtime, where it was like, meet Carol, and people were allowed to come in and very informally ask me questions, anything they could think of. And there was virtually nothing that was off the table. And during that 10-day, 2-week period, I continued dressing in male dress. And finally, when I thought it was time and people had kind of gotten used to the idea, I began coming to work in FEM. And it's been great ever since. And I get reminded a lot about what I'm accomplishing by being the example. A colleague, a male colleague, told me that before my transition, he had never really paid any attention, never really thought about transgender issues, didn't know any transgender people, he wasn't against it, for it, he just didn't understand it, and didn't know anything about it. And since my transition and working with me and seeing me every day, he says that now, every time there's something in the news about a transgender person, whether it's something good or a homicide or the Chaz Bono thing, he pays attention. He perks up his ears and he really pays attention to it, because now it's personal. And that makes me feel pretty good, because that's exactly the effect I wanted to have. I sent out an email that day to all of my colleagues outside of my immediate circle. There were something like 200, 250 people on my contact list. And I explained what I was going through and why. And I did not receive a single negative reply. And so maybe 500, 600 people who before April of last year did not know a trans person now know a trans person. And maybe when somebody they know starts talking smack about transgender people, they're going to say, you know what? I know Carolyn Weiss, and she's pretty good. And that's what I wanted to have happen. And so I'm sorry to get emotional, but it happens. I think it's the hormone. But, you know, all of us who transition in a public way become ambassadors for the community. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to be an ambassador and to show people that we are just like everybody else and deserving of respect just like everybody else. And I think I'll end it on that. Thank you.
We want to thank you all for coming today to Working Outside the Gender Binary, once again sponsored by Dolores Huerta Labor Institute. We will now be opening the floor for some question and answers to our panelists. Please just raise your hand if you have any questions. Anyone? All right.
I just wanted to thank you guys, you really professor for informing me because I didn't know a lot of the things you guys spoke about today, so I feel really happy and I'm actually
It was very touching, wasn't it? And thank you guys for going to the personal note and quantitatively too. Any other questions or comments, concerns? All right.
Can I give you guys a hug? Individually or?
I guess. I thought there was going to be like another.